The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
This is a Geek Bro podcast. Check.
Hey there, baby, what's going on with your sexy self? Oh, yeah. This is episode 57 of Childlike with Mike Valdes, and guess what? I'm the second part of that title, baby.
What's up, besties? This is episode 57 of Childlike at Best with Mike Valdes, and I am still the second part of that title. I hope you're having a great week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so happy that you're here. This week's episode is so exciting. I had a conversation with Guy Hutchinson. Guy is an author as well as the co-host of the Drunk on Disney podcast, which is a theme park podcast that he hosts with Dana Schneider, who is such a great guy as well. This is a really fun episode. We talk a lot about theme parks. We got to talk about Sesame Place, which is the Sesame Street theme park, which I never knew existed. So we got to talking a little bit about that, as well as our own theme park experiences growing up. Just a little bit of a forewarning, we did record this on Zoom, so it's going to sound a little bit like a phone call. It's not going to have the best quality because our internet went in and out during the episode, but I cleaned up the audio as much as I could, so hopefully it isn't too much of an issue listening. Regardless of that, this is a really fun conversation, and I really think that you guys are going to love this episode. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Guy Hutchinson. Was that a Drunk on Disney?
It was. It was an episode I did with a guy named Brad Farrell that was like a guest episode. We've been doing less of them in general because both Dana and I have a child each. We don't share the same one. We each have our own child. And so we both have to do homeschooling right now. Yeah. Which means that that's when we used to record, was during the time when the kids were at school. And so now, and he's in California, I'm in New Jersey, so we're different time zones, but there was always a window where both of us had kids in school. We could sit and record, at least once a week. Now we do not have that time. So, for us to record, it's either got to be late at night for him, early in the morning for me, or early in the morning for him, late at night for me, something like that. So.
Yeah. Dana's great. I love Dana.
You gotta have Dana on sometime.
I would love to, man. I mean, he's such a busy dude. But that's the thing.
He's super busy, but he would totally do it.
Yeah, I love Dana, man. He's like, I was thinking about this today while I was at the gym. I was like, Dana is like my drunk uncle, because like when I met him, Lisa introduced us. Lisa Correo introduced me to you and to Dana.
Sure.
And he was like, oh, you're a comic? I'm going to come to your show. And I had 4 shows that weekend, and he never came to any of them. And I was like, oh, he's like my drunk uncle. But like every single day. But what made it so great, it was almost like a bit. And that's why I think it's so funny, is that every single day he would tell me, I'm going to your show.
And every time he thought he would. I've gotten so used to this. Like, we would do a convention and we would meet somebody and they would say, oh, well, I'm going on my honeymoon to Walt Disney World. And they'd be like, save that. We'll have you come up and we'll talk. We'll have this conversation on stage. And then Friday night, the person would come up to me and I'd be like, if he waves you up on stage, well, I'll remind him you're here. And then at the end of the show, he'd be like, oh, I forgot to bring them up. Okay, we'll bring them up later this weekend. And I'd go to them and be like, don't even, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry. He's not going to remember. He's going to want to do it. And then he'll fly home and he'll say to me, we should have really got those guys on stage. But that's what he does. He's a
sweetheart, man.
He plans
a good dude. He's a good dude. It's very clear that his intentions are good. That's why I find it funny.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, man, I'm so excited to have you, Guy. Where did you grow up? And just tell me about that. Tell me about growing up. I would assume in Jersey?
I did. I grew up here. I left for a little bit, and then I came back because Jersey grabs a hold of you and never lets go. And I love it here. But I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and it's what I like about this area and what I loved about it as a kid is you get all 4 seasons. Which meant, we got snow up to here, and then you get summer so hot you can barely go outside. But Dad would always make you go outside and play every day in the summer because he wanted you out of the house. But yeah, no, I grew up in New Jersey, and I just love. I do love this state. I think this state is one of the more unique ones in the union.
Yeah, Jersey is awesome. I've only been once, actually. I went on my senior trip to Jersey just for a day.
Wow, that's quite a senior trip.
Yeah, just for a day. We went to Six Flags over Jersey. I'm sure you've been there.
Six Flags, that's...
Yeah, the thing that our listeners may or may not know is that you are a theme park enthusiast. Am I legally allowed to call you a theme park historian?
You know what's funny is I don't think I am, because I don't have like white gloves, and I don't look at documents while holding white gloves, and I don't have like a weird research team. But I've been called that by a number of reputable newspapers, so I will say that you can say it as well.
Yeah, I would say
you'll be right or not is.
Yeah, I would say
but
so.
I do I'll tell you the thing about theme park history is I think the difference between somebody that's like a theme park history buff or a theme park fan and somebody that's a theme park historian is things like when I did a book about a park called Sesame Place, which is a relatively local park to me. And I did it because I was fascinated with everything. I wanted to know how many trash cans they had when they opened. I wanted to know about the history of all their merchandise. And every little change to the buildings, like when they changed, buildings from flat windows to rounded windows and stuff. And I find that that's very different than somebody that is just a fan of theme parks and lives it and loves it. They may say, oh yeah, but I don't go to the shows, I don't really like the stage shows, or I don't like the parades, or, and so they don't have a care about that, or they only like what's there now and what's coming. But I think that's really the difference is, the minutia of it and just wanting to know everything. There's, nothing out there that you don't want to grab hold of and learn more about.
Yeah, and it's so funny, the year that I met you at SuperCon, I think it was last year.
Yeah, it was last summer.
You did a whole show on Disney theme parks, and for 45 minutes to an hour, you mostly just talked about like the reusable bags at Disney. like majority of what you talked about. But I thought it was super funny because like people would interrupt and ask questions about whatever. And I believe that the Slinky Dog ride had just come out. So you were showing video footage of it and things like that. but it almost became a joke where Dana would just be like, so the reusable bags at Disneyland, they used to sell them for $1. It was super funny.
Dana and I, we both collect ephemera. So we collect the bags as well as all the maps and everything. So usually that's the stuff we're weirdly the most excited about. We're like, oh, there's a new map out. There's a new, they changed the font on the receipts, just weird stuff like that.
That's so nerdy. I love it. That's so funny.
It's just the way it is. I can't.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. So going back to childhood, what kind of kid would you say that you were growing up? Like, who did you sit with at the lunch table? That kind of thing. I
was an indoor kid, man. I'll tell you, I didn't like going outside. I did all that. Like I was a Boy Scout. I was an Eagle Scout, but I didn't like camping. I didn't like dirt. I didn't like any of it. And so at school, I did pretty good. I think I was relatively popular, and I was good at some sports, so that was good. But it was one of those things where, I was interested in pop culture and entertainment that was about 5 years younger than I was. So in other words, everybody else I knew was like, oh, I can't wait to see that new Batman movie. And I'm like, they got to follow that Bird movie coming out. There's a new Muppet film coming out. You guys aren't excited about that? No?
Let's talk about that fandom though. What were the things that you were into? Like movies, television, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I was super into Garbage Pail Kids. Do you know Garbage Pail Kids? I know you're much younger.
I do. Believe it or not, they came out with a cereal and we reviewed that cereal on this podcast. So I'm very aware of Garbage Pail Kids. I saw the movie, which the movie's older than I am, but it's a good bad movie.
The animated series was closer to the I felt the actual core of the trading cards.
Okay.
I felt the movie kind of left in a different direction a little too much. But I like those. Oh, you should see it. You can probably find episodes online, and it was pretty good. It actually never aired because there were a lot of protests from parents groups, and there was a big thing in the 80s about you couldn't advertise too much on your cartoon. Now, all of them, and I'm not saying commercials. What I'm saying is, like He-Man would be like, I've got a new vehicle. And you'd be like, oh, I have to buy that vehicle because I know they'll be selling that. So like He-Man, they actually fought the Garbage Pail Kids on that concept that it was just a commercial for the cards. And CBS eventually said, okay, we won't air it.
Oh, wow. That is insane.
The thing about like the Garbage Pail Kids and Mad Magazine and things like that was it felt to me that it was like they were really sticking it to, you know, the Cabbage Patch Kids. And I just was like, oh, this is so counterculture. This is so hip, you know, and oh man, how did they get away with this? How did they not get sued? And, you know, I'm so bad for liking it, you know?
I love it.
I loved any kind of parody movie that would come out, you know, like Hot Shots was a little later, but there were a lot of, you know, occasionally the pirate movie was one that I really liked. And I loved pro wrestling. I thought pro wrestling was the greatest combination of everything I liked put in one place at a time. But the real thing I did love was theme parks. I really was big into them from the time I was really little.
Right. So in Jersey, at that time, you had Six Flags and Sesame Place, or what did you have?
So Six Flags Great Adventure, which actually started out, it was just called Great Adventure, and then Six Flags purchased it. Most of the Six Flags theme parks, they didn't build; they just would find one that was going bankrupt, and they'd come in and offer money and buy it.
Right.
And so when I was a kid, Six Flags had the worst theme park accident in the history of theme parks. And 8 teenagers died. It was a real terrible event. And then like a year later, they had the second worst accident in the history of theme parks. And so this was when I was a kid. So I had gone there like once, and then my mom was like, you're never going again. That's it, you know, and I didn't go again until I was married, you know. And so I didn't go to Six Flags a lot. Now, Sesame Place is in Pennsylvania. It was right over the bridge from where I live. So it was even closer than Six Flags. But Sesame Place opened 1980. And at that time, I was 6 years old. So it was like I was the perfect age, you know, for it. And it was too much money. And I looked now, I think it was $4 to go in. But my dad was like, this is too much. We can't all go to this place and spend all that money. So we never went, and we would drive by it and I'd see it, you know, and I'd see the commercials, and I knew it was there because it was right next to the mall. So we'd go to the mall, and, you know, you'd go to get shoes or something, you know, back to school time, and I'd be like, man, I wonder what's going on in there. And then eventually I did get to go when I was a little older. My younger sister was born, and my parents decided, all right, it's, you know, about time we go check out that Sesame Place. And I really loved that. Sesame Place was interesting, though, because it was not a traditional amusement park. They didn't have, at that time, now they do today, they have a couple roller coasters and tons of rides, but at that time, they didn't have anything you would classify as a ride because they wanted every activity to be kid powered. So there was nothing that was passive. So you were either learning, you were physically active, and it was really neat. But the first theme park I ever went to, the one that I really remember in my head as being the first real theme park experience, was we went on a trip to Ohio, and they had a SeaWorld in Ohio at the time. And I just remember like being in one of those large stadiums, you know, see like the Shamu show, and I could see like a roller coaster in the background this way, and I could see something else this way, and just being like, this is amazing. This is so big, you know, this is just so enormous.
That's so crazy. I didn't know that they had a SeaWorld in Ohio.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, it eventually, I believe it was purchased by Six Flags eventually, and then they rethemed it, and then they, I think, closed it at this point. But yeah, it was SeaWorld, Ohio.
This is something I learned from you, but the creator of Ball Pits was from SeaWorld, right?
Yeah, so this was Eric McMillan. Now, Eric McMillan, I don't know how deep you want me to go on Eric McMillan, but it is a very interesting.
Wherever you'd like to go. We're just having a conversation.
So Eric McMillan they called him, he's still alive. And as a matter of fact, I get emails from him. We email each other relatively regularly.
That's awesome.
but Eric McMillan was called the next Walt Disney in the late 1970s. And the title was not wrong at all. He so influenced theme park design and playground design, but people don't know his name. Unlike Walt Disney, he didn't put his name, he didn't own it and put his name on it and put a statue of himself in the middle. But Eric McMillan said that one day he was looking at, the ball pit, which is an interesting story, but he said one day he was looking at a catalog from the 1800s of playground equipment. And he said that he looked at it and said, there's nothing in here that's any different than they're using today in 1975. And he said, why in 100 years have we not changed playground equipment? So he was the first person to really say, hey, why not put, soft rubberized flooring under a swing set? Why not use plastic tube slides? And there were other people that did some of these advancements, but he was a big guy and looking for things like the cable glide, that military would use for training exercises, and him saying, well, this could be used as a fun, recreation. And so he changed, a lot of playground equipment as well as smaller theme park equipment. And the one story he told, which I thought was so funny, was he said that one day he was having some drinks with friends, and he looked at a jar of cocktail onions, and he thought, I'd love to swim around with those cocktail onions. And he said, and this is the quote was the best, because he was like, of course, you couldn't really do that with a pit full of onions because it would smell. So I decided we should do it with a pit full of balls, a pit full of plastic balls. And so he came up with this idea. It was 1978, I believe, at SeaWorld. It was, I think it was called like Captain Kids section. It was a kiddie section where they put a ball pit. It was the first one anywhere in the world. And then 2 years later, they put it in Sesame Place in Pennsylvania. And one of the things that I always tell people is you really have to look at the perspective of time with this. Like, we look at ball pits and we're like, oh my God, they're disgusting. I don't want my kid in it. It's gross. It's mundane. They were at every McDonald's for a while or Chuck E. Cheese. They're not like exciting. But when he invented it, nobody had ever seen it. And like the big commercial was, you can swim without getting wet. And adults would get in there and say, this is so cool. Look at this. And it was really deep too. Theirs was like 3 or 4 feet deep and probably 15, 20 feet wide. So, you could really move around in there, and it was, you throw the balls on each other and whatever. And with COVID, you would never do it. I know. It was a real novel invention, and he invented a lot of other stuff. Very fascinating guy, and he designed. He was one of the two main designers for Sesame Place, and he designed like the playground equipment. It is weird. Mel Blanc actually introduced him to Jim Henson, and so you have to look into what this guy's doing, and so he did that part of it. And there was another guy, Milton Glaser, who died earlier this year, who designed the look of the park. So the combination of the two is what gave you that park, which is a really interesting park. And they have Sesame Street sections now of the SeaWorld parks, and they're going to be opening up another Sesame Place out in San Diego, I hear. So
that's interesting. Until I heard about your book, I don't think I heard of Sesame Place. I didn't think it was a Sesame Street theme park.
It's interesting. So they opened it in 1980, and then they had plans to build 14 of them. And they built the second one in Texas, and there were a lot of mistakes in the Texas park. I mean, one of the things was it was so successful in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, that they said, well, we'll make it bigger, and we'll make it, and they shouldn't have. They should have kind of stuck with the original model. And, they kind of, like, one of the things about it was, if you take an obstacle course, and one of the ideas that they had at that park was that you would build it down low, so the kids would climb down like a little flight of stairs and go in there, and there was like a pit where the parents could stand around the edge, and the kids would be in an obstacle course. And the idea for that, I always thought, was so parents could keep an eye on their kids. But I talked one day to a woman, which made sense. I mean, that as a parent, that's what I would want. But I talked to a woman who was the psychologist for the park, or she wasn't the psychologist. There was two people that were in charge, but she was in charge of a lot of the child care elements of the park. And she said that wasn't the reason. She goes, the reason was so the little kids could look up and see their parents. And so these kids that might otherwise get scared if they go into something, like a haunted house or whatever, now they could get halfway through, look up, oh, there's mom. Okay, I'm good. I can still, I can venture a little further. Well, when they built it in Texas, they were like, let's build it higher and make it so the kids can't see anybody. So that, it'll be so much more thrilling. And, there were a lot of mistakes like that. But the problem was that happened. So that park tanked, the second one. Yeah. And then Sesame Street, Children's Television Workshop at the time, had a deal with Atari that went belly up. So they had these two big deals. One of them with SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, which at the time was Busch beer, it was Anheuser-Busch,
Anheuser-Busch,
and all that. So it was one deal with them, the other deal with Atari, which was Time Warner. So those two big companies were like, we lost $5 million. Who cares? No big deal. We'll write it off and sell more, sell more water with a hint of alcohol. But for Children's Television Workshop, they were like, we don't know if we can continue to make Sesame Street anymore. We blew all this money. So at that point, they were like, let's put a hold on this. And they didn't build another one for decades. But I'll tell you, if you are ever in the area, I will get us both in there. We will hug Elmo and we'll walk down the street. We'll go on the water slide with the big giant rubber ducky at the top. We'll have the best time.
Oh my gosh, I would love that so much. I'm a real big fan of all the Henson Workshop stuff.
My role model. Like when I was a kid, I was like, I want to be a guy like that because he just seemed attainable what he was doing. He had this idea, these puppets. He seemed friendly and down to earth. Like Walt Disney, I loved, but he seemed like he was a big shot businessman. And Jim Henson, who was a big shot businessman, dating Daryl Hannah and driving around in flashy cars, came off like he was this everyman that might live next door to you.
Yeah, he really did. I mean, a lot of children's creators that are looked upon now, at least in my generation, were a lot like that. Like Fred Rogers is looked like that, where it's just like, man, he just seemed like a really loving and caring, normal guy, and the same thing with Jim Henson. Granted, Fred Rogers didn't have like convertibles and wasn't dating Hollywood actresses or anything.
He didn't have convertibles. He wasn't dating Hollywood actresses, but he was uber wealthy. I can tell you a little bit about him. I actually have some really cool stories about him, but he was a very wealthy dude. But what were you going to say?
I'm sure, man. He seems, he's just like, do you know Ed Sheeran?
Yeah.
If you were to see him live, like he just dresses in a t-shirt and jeans, you wouldn't think this guy's a billionaire. And he is. There's 5 songs on Billboard charts right now that he wrote, So like he's one of the biggest people ever, but he just doesn't act like that. And there's something kind of cool about that in a way. Like there's something very endearing. It also makes you realize that you're happy to see the good people are getting good things. Yeah. I'm glad that Jim Henson got huge. I'm glad that Fred Rogers got his.
I just wish both of those guys got to live longer. I would have, But here's the thing. This is the difference with Fred Rogers from just about any other children's creator. Yeah. He inherited a huge amount of wealth. He came from an extremely wealthy family. So because of this, when he entered into television, he had the amazing ability to say no. He was able to, if he didn't like the way they wanted to do it, he could say, well, that's fine. I won't do it that way. He took several years off of that show just to try to learn new things to put into the show. And that's one of the things about, Sesame Street, when they did the television show, it was backed by Joan Gans Cooney and Lloyd Morissette, these were millionaires before they did it. And they spent 3 years and tons of their own money to try to figure out how to make the best show possible. Now, you think, well, gee, it'd be great if that show was made by some struggling person that just broke through, but a struggling person wouldn't have had the money to put into, saying, hey, let's educationally test what children like so we can make a show that fits them, and so it is interesting. But yeah, Fred Rogers, very wealthy guy. I wrote to him a couple times when I was a teenager, which again shows you what a weird kid I was. a thank you letter to Fred Rogers, and he wrote me back a very personalized letter. And so I wrote him another letter, and then he wrote me another letter back, and I was like, oh, I got to write to him again, but I should give him some time. It's only been like 2 months. And he, like, in the email, in the letter, he was like, you know, it's good to hear from you again. And I was like, oh God, he remembers me. Okay. But I found out later they actually archived all of the letters that people would send him so they could cross-reference things and whatever. And so
yeah, they had to, man. I mean, there's probably thousands, even more than that, kids writing to him. You know, that's nuts.
I got very lucky. A number of years ago, they still had all those sets at the QED studios, I believe it was, in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And they said that they were going to have an open house where people could come through and walk through and see the Mr. Rogers sets. I don't remember what year this was, but I want to say like maybe 2007 or 8, you know. Yeah. And I found out about it like on a Thursday, and I don't live anywhere near Pittsburgh. That's a long drive. So I emailed them and I said, you know, I'd love to see these. I know they won't be on display, but I know that at that time they had the castle and the treehouse in the lobby. And so I said, you know, I'd really like to, you know, schedule a tour. The woman got back in touch with me. She was like, sure. You know, how many are in your tour group? And I'm like, I guess 3 other people. Like, I got my wife and my parents, and I said, well, we're going to Pittsburgh next weekend. And so we got there, and this young lady was showing us around the studio. And then she said, you know, because I kept asking some very specific questions about shooting Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I didn't care about anything else they did there. And so she said, you know, David Newell, who's Mr. McFeely, he works here. You know, he's the head of communications at the time. And she said, he's out visiting with children. She said, but he's going to be back later. I'll tell him that you were here. And if he's able to maybe meet with you and take a picture, you know, I'll tell you and you can come back. Right?
Oh,
so
wow.
I wait. Later, I get a call. He's here. He wants to meet with you. I said, great. So I go back there. Now, he didn't just take a picture with me. He gave me a whole nother tour. We played piano together. Then he showed me all the sets, which were in storage. He took me to a floor of the building, and they were just kind of like propped up against the wall. Now they're in museums. But at that time, they were just like propped up against the wall. I was able to see as much as I wanted. I picked up like Emmy Awards and, you know, sat in his office and talked to him. And the greatest thing about him, he's such a genuinely sweet person, was that I'm there. I'm a grown man. You know, I'm a grown man that's waiting to see him. And he was so nice to me and my family. And he said, you know, he goes, I didn't get the message until after I had changed and taken off the fake mustache and, you know, taken off the wig and everything. He goes, because otherwise I would have left it on because I wish you got to see me in the Mr. McFeely costume. And I was like, who thinks that way? You know, who looks at it? You know, a grown man with a beard and was like, oh man, if only I could cosplay as my character. But he was very sweet man.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's so cool. It's funny, you know, growing up, for me, I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian home. And so a lot of my pop culture growing up was like kind of religious based, I guess. I wasn't really allowed to watch a bunch of stuff. Like I was allowed to watch little, you know, like I was allowed to watch, you know, Mr. Rogers and things like that, very basic kids things, you know, Nickelodeon, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, a lot of my pop culture was Christian. And one of the shows that were really popular when I was growing up was this show called Adventures in Odyssey. Do you remember this show, or do you know about this? You don't know about it.
I was going to say VeggieTales because I was like, I know that.
VeggieTales, yeah, everybody knows VeggieTales. Yeah, I liked VeggieTales as well. That was a really
Adventures in Odyssey.
Yes, that was the name of it. Okay. So the reason why I'm even bringing this up, it's all gonna hark back to a semi-weird compliment that I'm about to give you right now. Yeah. So the first time I saw you do Drunk on Disney live was maybe like 4 to 5 years ago. It was maybe even more than that. It was a long time ago. And I remembered being like, wow, man, this guy has such a soothing voice. There's something about his voice that reminds me of something. And I love it so much. And it's what made me subscribe to Drunk on Disney. And again, there's just something about your voice that is so soothing.
I think part of that is, though, that I'm paired up with Dana, whose voice is incredibly grating. So
That is a fair assessment.
So is there a connection to, do I sound like somebody that was on this Adventures in Odyssey?
It took me a couple of years to realize it, but there is a character on Adventures in Odyssey that is named Mr. Whitaker. He's a scientist who made like a time machine and all these different kinds of things. He has a machine that he has called the Imagination Station, and it would make all the kids, go back to like biblical times or whatever the case, that whatever they were doing on these episodes, which I, later found out were all like stolen from Frasier and things like that. But I was like, oh my gosh, I finally figured it out. He reminds me of Mr. Whitaker. And granted, this is a huge compliment. I know you don't know. Yeah, I know you don't know who he is or anything like that. And I'm sure there's a handful of people that are listening to this and have finally made the correlation themselves. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that he's saying this right now. But it's true. Yeah, there's it's something I wanted to tell you when I was
looking this up. I can't wait to check it out. You know the old thing though, that nobody ever thinks they sound like they sound. Yeah. Except for people like you and I who record ourselves all the time, so we listen to ourselves so we know what we sound. Every other human being, when you play a tape of them, they're like, well, I don't sound like that. Oh, don't play it. I have a question for you.
Yeah, I have an answer.
We were talking about theme parks.
Yes.
Did you go to theme parks a lot as a kid? Were you in the Miami area then?
Yeah. So theme parks are a really big deal for me as well, which, is majority of what I feel like our conversation is going to be about. But yeah, I was real big on Disney World and went to Universal Studios, Islands of Adventure, Busch Gardens, SeaWorld.
What hooked you about it though? Was there like a moment where you were like, this I really love? This is...
Man, that's a really great question. Because here's the thing. I feel like there are people that love theme parks that mostly just love rides. Right. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what they're made for. But beyond that, they're not really like, well, what was the experience like? What do the walls look like? Like, what does this or that look like?
Especially the awesomeness of the experience is that it's what's the difference between, your amusement park or your carnival and your theme park. You can go to a carnival and go on rides.
I guess really, truly, the park that probably did this for me, and then later on, as I grew older, it became more of a Disney thing for me, was Universal, because Universal was something where their whole thing was you ride the movies.
Yeah.
So going on ET and feeling like you're in that movie.
That's still a great ride. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If they tear it down, I'm burning that theme park to the ground.
When they closed Back to the Future, I just was
so mad, man.
Shame, man. That ride was so much better than any ride like it. It's not necessarily my favorite type of ride, simulator, but that one was so perfect.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, it's a really bittersweet thing for me because I'm a huge fan of The Simpsons.
Yeah, The Simpsons ride is great. But it's the same thing.
To be honestly, if they left everything from The Simpsons except that ride and just kept the Back to the Future ride, that would have been the perfect compromise for me.
There would have been plenty of room to build another Simpsons ride. They could have just, built in this direction.
Exactly.
I love the Simpsons area. I love going into, Moe's Tavern.
Yeah, me too.
It is the perfect kind of cheesy immersion, where you go in there. It's silly and over the top. But I remember, like, when I was a kid, being on Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Looking at, like, the fireflies and, looking at, like, the pirate's hairy leg and being like, somebody built all of this. Somebody, had the idea that that should be there. And, it's the idea of, like on Earth, that's all done, we don't build it all. It's all, it's all there. The trees are there. The sun goes up and down. All this stuff happens. But it's like somebody was like, I'm going to have it happen exactly this way. I'm going to have a fire here. I'm going to have, and I found that stuff fascinating. And I still do. I mean, I still love that stuff. And I still love all the real stuff there, as opposed to the stuff with screens, which, like we were talking about Back to the Future, usually doesn't hit me the same way, because it's one of those things. If you go on the Carousel of Progress 100 times, God bless you. But it's sort of different every time, because it is there in 3 dimensions and you can look in different directions. Same thing with a ride, but a movie, it's just there. It's not changing no matter where you sit. It's still the same movie. There's no tweaks that happen.
Yeah, it's great. I have a buddy of mine where we had a theme park podcast for a minute. And we mostly just didn't do it because we're about 3 hours or 4 hours south of Disney World. And in order for us to be able to do what we wanted to do, we'd have to be there more often.
That's quite a drive, too.
It is, yeah.
And it's, for people that don't know, you're just driving by nothing for long stretches, and then garbage dumps where the sky darkens with crows.
Yeah, it is so boring. It's such a boring drive. Oh my gosh, it's awful. Yeah, but and I'm glad that you know how boring it is, and we can talk about that, because it's just like I feel like it's the thing that nobody talks about, how boring of a drive it is from South Florida to Central Florida.
I mean, I've done it a bunch of times. There's been a bunch of times where we were in Miami to do a show. We would always make a point to at the end of the show, take off and head to Walt Disney World. But that ride it always feels longer than any ride you've ever, any trip you've ever taken.
Yeah.
It's just nothing. There's nothing there.
But what I was going to say was that he's been on the podcast before. His name's Jerry Lopez. He's really awesome. And he's the same as me, in the sense of like, we just love theme parks and we love everything. Like we're just like, if there is a menu, we want to try everything on the menu. If there is, like, we're just weirdos like that. And we're like in our 20s and we're geeking out about the Carousel of Progress. Like, we're guys like that, And like we go on the People Mover and we're like, this is a ride. And like people our age are like, no, it's not. Like, where's the thrill? And we're like, what are you talking about? Like, learning about theme parks is the thrill. Like, this is the People Mover is the most relaxing ride ever.
Yeah, it's wonderful and it's cool up there. And then the other thing is, you get that weird sensation of being like, oh, I can look at what the buildings look like from up here, and I can see.
Yeah, one of the best experiences, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, is to go on that ride like right before the park closes.
Yes.
Because you can see a semi-empty park, or the park kind of emptying out as you're still on it. Oh man, it's so great.
The park is so beautiful at night, and you can see further at night, which I also really like, just because of all the lights and the way that they light everything for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of my best experiences, or a lot of like my like fun stories are always involving theme parks for some strange reason. Like, for example, the first time I ever went to, what is it called? It might be called something different now, but at the time it was called Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween.
Yeah, I think they still call it that. Yeah.
Did they still call it that? Okay. I didn't know if it was something different, like Mickey's COVID, stay away from us, stay 6 feet apart. Here's your bag, leave us alone. Like, I don't know if they call it that. So, but I went there. I might have been in like 10th grade or 11th grade or something. And I went with a bunch of buddies. My mom was a teacher at the time, and there was a teachers convention that was going on in Orlando. And so my mom was like, hey, why don't you and your buddies just go to Disney World, and do the magic hour thing. And then, when you're done, we'll pick you up or whatever. And so we were just chilling at Disney World during Halloween, just like they had, I'm sure they don't do it like this anymore because this was like the first time that they had ever done this, but they had taken the teacup ride and one of the teacups and just filled it to the brim with candy. And so, and there were people there, or cast members, excuse me, that were around. And you could just go up there with a bag and they would fill the bag if you felt like it. Like, it was awesome.
The candy is not the problem. The amount of candy you can get, but the fact that that's 40 years of butt sweat in that teacup. That is, you can't sanitize it enough. It's hot in Florida.
Yeah.
Every one of those rides, you can wipe them down enough. You know this. When you get done at a theme park, you throw your pants away.
That's great. That's very, very accurate. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's the only time you'll ever need like Gold Bond is after you've been to a theme park.
Yeah.
They should have theme park grade Gold Bond.
I'll tell you, I'm on one of the Facebook groups, the thing pops up in your Facebook. Yeah. I saw somebody posted recently, it was a picture of one of the seats and it was all sweaty and they were like, I couldn't believe this. I was going to get in this ride. And I was like, dude, if it's not sweaty, it's dried sweat. You're either getting wet sweat or dried sweat. Just sit on it. You have no choice.
You're getting sweat from the 1500s on that thing. Like, I mean, it's...
You can start a new civilization.
Yeah, you can start a brand new civilization with the sweat from the teacups. Yeah, it's... Oh, my gosh. But...
And the puke, there's got to be an extra amount of puke.
There has to be, right? There has to be. Absolutely.
The pukiest ride. I've never puked on it, but I feel like that's got to be the pukiest ride at Walt Disney World.
Honestly, oh my gosh, the last time I rode it, it was one of the most depressing days of my life because it was the day that I realized I was too old for a lot of rides. It was like, I'm getting too old for this. And I went on the teacups and with the same buddy, and his whole thing, he's like, yeah, I'm really good at the teacups. If you want to go fast, I'm the fastest guy in the freaking West.
What's his first name?
Jerry.
Jerry. Okay. It's a different person, but I have the same story about another person. Go on.
Yeah. And so he's like, yeah, he's like the fastest turntable person in the West. And we're going so fast, man. I mean, I even told him after this, I was like, no joke. If the ride lasted 1 second longer, I would have thrown up all over you, dude.
I rode on the teacups one night. They were staying open till 2 a.m. It was one of those where because
the magic hours, yeah.
And we were on the way from Miami, but we stopped on the way at the MyCot.
Okay.
In Fort Lauderdale, right before. And the MyCot, which recently closed, I hope it reopens someday because it was an amazing place. But we were at this Polynesian place and, I'm eating a ton of shrimp and seafood and then drinking really hard mixed cocktails. And then we drive the rest of the way and we're all shouting at each other in the car. We're just, hey, this and that, because we're all getting raspy. And so we get to Walt Disney World and there's a friend of ours named Ken who was meeting us there. Now, Ken had nothing to drink because he doesn't drink and had probably not eaten a belly full of seafood.
Is it Ken Plume?
Ken Plume. Yeah, that's what it is. So Ken said to me, he goes, I know the fastest teacup. He's like, it's the pink one or whatever. And I was like, really? And then he goes, yeah, it's the fastest one. So he's like, all right, we got to spin it real fast. And so I don't want to tell him, but I don't want it spinning fast at all. So I'm gripping it and slowing it down as I'm pretending to go. And I'm like, I don't know why it's so slow today, Ken. I feel like I'm, like turning a giant crank on the side of a building.
Oh my gosh. It was like Indiana Jones fighting with the guy to try to get the Ark of the Covenant. You're just like, for the love of God, please.
Yeah. And so I was trying to slow that metal Frisbee down. And I made it. I survived. But that was the closest I ever came.
I mean, that trip, I got close twice. The other one was not Spaceship Earth. It was Mission Space. That's what it was.
Space can do that, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, people died on that ride. So like no lie, people died. So
killed more people than OJ. That is,
it has. That is very true.
If you think about it, I think Mission Space has probably killed more people than most of the hurricanes that come through. So, people go to bed at night and they're worried about the hurricanes. Nobody goes to bed and is like, oh God, I hope Mission Space doesn't come in here and get me. So then probably give you a little solace when you go to bed during a hurricane.
Could you imagine if a Walt Disney ride could go to jail? That would be hilarious. Like just a ride in jail. Gosh, that would be so funny.
Yeah, animatronics taking a stand.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that would be so great. And like the witnesses are just video of the guys from Apollo 13 because they're in the queue. Oh my gosh, that would be great.
And that they have like the first family in space and they're there with their dog. That's when you go through that queue, it starts with like the real stuff and then it goes into the future to just the wacky, imaginary. I did one time, you've heard of drinking around the world, right?
Yeah.
Drinking around Epcot. And I did that one time. And since then I tell everybody, I'm like, don't do it. Just drink and have a good time.
Right.
There's two reasons not to do it. One is it costs you like $250 to drink in each country. But I took a picture in each one, and it was like a flip book of me getting sicker. So it was like the first one I'm smiling, by the last one, like my hat's up like this.
Oh my gosh!
I'm just in terrible, terrible pain. It's more than you need to do.
The more fun one, I think, is the Flower and Garden Fest.
That's good. Yeah.
That's a really good one because there's different foods that you can try.
Yeah, you try all different stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I mean, granted, it'll probably cost you about as much it does to drink around the world as well.
But what's good is you can share those little tiny plates a little better than you can share a drink,
That is very true. And also you can pick and choose as well. Like if you don't feel like having whatever Canada has to offer, you can go to Mexico or you can go wherever. It's so funny too, because when I was a kid, it was like a punishment to go to Epcot. But then I grew up and I was like, oh, that's why I hated it, because I couldn't do anything until I was an adult.
When I was a kid, my parents, we always went to Epcot, and I think I had a different perspective on it because of this. I was told that this was the equivalent of me being at school, and they would tell my teacher, well, he did spend 2 days at Epcot, and they'd be like, oh, Epcot, learned about stuff, got some culture. This sounds like a well thought out educational trick. This no longer sounds like Teacups. This is clearly he was learning about the history of transportation, and he learned about imagination and communication of the future. This is he went to all these different countries.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was not way older than I should admit that I realized that wasn't every country there was. It's like, there's one day I was like, why is there no Uruguay? I thought they all were here. And I started doing the math, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, it's not very many countries.
Man, the thing, honestly, though, I'm sure, I don't know if you feel the same, but one of the most annoying things about Epcot is like, why do you have a United States pavilion?
I like the because I like that show.
We're here.
I'll tell you why they have. It's not for you and I, although I do love that show. It's for the people that are coming from other countries and they're visiting. They want to be like, and I saw America while I was there, and this is what it looks like.
Yeah, that is fair, I guess. That is a good assessment.
It's the host pavilion. It's right in the middle. It's got, I think, a really wonderful show. Now it has that Sam the Eagle barbecue joint, which I haven't tried, but I've seen lots of pictures.
I've heard it's very good, and it has a lot of cool Muppet Easter eggs in it, which is cool.
Yeah. I like anything with the Muppets.
Same here. Yeah. Same here. I think I give the Muppets a little more credit than I probably should because of how I grew up. But I think one of the last great things that the Muppets ever did was Muppet Vision. So I love Muppet Vision.
That's the last project that Jim Henson worked on. So, that's it. So, I mean, I think there was some good stuff after that. I think Muppet Treasure Island and Muppet Christmas Carol, I think are both. I think everything, when I watch really bad Muppet stuff, it still gets raised a little bit. Because I'm like, well, I was watching puppets for an hour. How great is it supposed to be? But there have been some pretty bad, some pretty low lows on the.
Yeah, remember when they tried to make the Muppets into The Office? That was awful.
Yeah, I was okay with that. That I found somewhat enjoyable. There was one that they did called Kermit Swamp Years.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
The worst thing I'd ever seen.
It was awful.
Bad.
Oh, my gosh.
And there was a Muppets Wizard of Oz, I remember, was really bad. And on paper, it sounds great. Like you read the description of it, you're like, sounds perfect. You read the cameos, you're like, Quentin Tarantino's in here. Sounds wonderful. Like everything about it sounds fun. Just missed. But they did one around that time, a Very Merry Muppet Christmas movie. It was pretty good. There have been ones that I thought were watchable that, I could enjoy them, But I think sometimes when you have a creator like that that's so closely associated, if you look throughout history, the Muppets are unique in that they continued after their creator. Charlie McCarthy was the most famous puppet in the world. Yeah. And then in the 1930s, he was more famous than any other character, including like Mickey Mouse. He was it. And his creator died, and Charlie McCarthy died with him. Howdy Doody was a phenomenon forever. But at some point, when the people that have their hands behind it are gone, it sometimes doesn't always translate. I'm sure there's a lot of people that, get to work on a Muppet project from Disney that are like, oh, I was a really big Muppet fan. I really am excited to work with them. And then they start thinking while they're working on it, I'd like to create my own thing, though. If I did, this, I'd like to do it this way. And, I would start these characters from scratch, and have, I wouldn't have this personality.
Yeah.
This episode of Childlike at Best with Mike Valdes is brought to you by the Crunch Cup. Save time in the morning by taking your cereal on the go. Simply add cereal to the inner cup, milk into the outer cup, screw on the lid, and you're ready to crunch. Eat cereal in the car, at your desk, or anywhere else you want. Go to thecrunchcup.com to purchase what I think is a genius invention and use the discount code MikeValdes10. That's Mike, M-I-K-E, Valdes, V-A-L-D-E-S, the number 10, to save 10% off of your order. You can also sign up for their monthly giveaway to win a year's supply of cereal. So what are you waiting for? Go to thecrunchcup.com and use promo code MikeValdes10 to save 10% off of your order. The Crunch Cup. It's better than spooning. This episode of Childlike at Best with Mike Valdes is also brought to you by Real Good Foods. If you're a long-time Childlike at Best listener, you know about Real Good Foods. They have incredibly tasty, low-carb, keto-friendly meals like cauliflower crust pizza, stuffed chicken, breakfast sandwiches, and ice cream. But now Real Good Foods has a brand new product, low-carb, high-protein entree bowls. And look, I'm talking chicken lasagna, lemon chicken, Mongolian beef, creamy carbonara, cauliflower mash and braised beef. I mean, guys, this is absolutely incredible. And during this time of lockdown, it is really nice to just have something that you can throw in the microwave and know that you're actually getting good ingredients and it's actually tasty as well. So check out realgoodfoods.com and use the promo code BESTIE to save 15% off of your order. That's realgoodfoods.com. Use promo code BESTIE to save 15% off of your order at checkout. Real Good Foods. Keep it real.
I want to move on into the next bit here. Just out of curiosity, what were your favorite snacks as a kid?
Ooh, I'm not sure. So you're talking like snacks, like little things, or like just food in general?
Just anything that you snack on, like for example, my generation, the 90s kid generation, was real into snacks. Like it was always like fruit roll-ups and like what extreme fruit thing can you get? And like,
no longer do you have to buy fruit in a basket. You buy it by the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I remember all that stuff. And I do remember like granola bars were really big when I was little. And then they made like weird little granola bites, which was like, oh my God, it's in a totally different shape. I love it so much more.
Marketing, right?
But we had a family of 5. And so I think the snacks were usually gone by the time I got there.
Yeah, sure. That's fair. Absolutely. Another thing we like to talk about on this podcast is cereal, because I feel like it's the food that encompasses childhood. So what were your favorite cereals growing up?
So I got very into buying a cereal based on the celebrity or cartoon attached to it. So a lot of times it's not my favorite cereals. It's just, I was like, Addams Family was really great. So we were going to eat the Addams Family cereal. But I do remember a few I really liked. There was one that was called Big Mix. And on the cover, they had this weird animal that was like part chicken, part moose. He was like a bunch of different things all put together. He would sweep up the floor of the factory every night, and he would serve this in a box. And so you would get it was pieces of other cereals that they had put together, and they advertised it that he swept it off the floor. And I remember it being delicious.
That's so funny. The marketing is literally telling you they'll eat garbage off the floor.
This is garbage. And we were like, garbage? I'm so in for that.
Garbage? That sounds amazing. That's so funny.
It was called Big Mix. And it had 2 X's.
Of course it did. What other cereals other than Big Mix were your staples?
I liked Life cereal. I liked Fruity Pebbles. Big fan of Fruity Pebbles. Fruity Pebbles, I like to pour the milk and then leave them for a while, which is hard as a kid to walk away and wait. But I liked when they eventually congealed into this almost like fruity cement.
That is very interesting.
I did like I liked Life cereal, but then on occasion we get Cinnamon Life, and I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
And then the next week she'd be like, "You want Cinnamon Life?" I'd be like, "No, we can't do that too often. We need that is a special occasion cereal. Let's go with plain Life."
Man, growing up for you, Cinnamon Life was Cinnamon Toast Crunch, essentially.
That was good cereal too, though. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I have a bit about it that I do on stage, but it's the LSD of cereal. Yes. It is the best. It's a drug. It's the LSD of cereal, because when you eat it, you don't see yourself gaining 15 pounds, so it's, but it's true. The freshman 15 when you're in college is always started with a Costco box of Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
It's that, ramen, and it's no one there to tell you these are bad choices.
It's true.
It's like we were talking about, snacks at my house. Your parents chose what to put in there and the amount to put in there. And then when you get on your own, you're like, well, why would I ever want to run out? I remember a friend of mine one time said, we were watching a commercial. They had a commercial for Baskin Robbins or something. They're like, you no longer need an excuse to buy a cake. All you need is your picture. We'll put a picture on a cake. And he goes, I don't need an excuse to buy a cake. I'm going to go buy a cake now. And I was like, that's the difference between being an actual adult and a child. Those extremes, you don't do that. It's that small period in between where you're like, I would like to eat a cake for dinner tonight. I shall go buy one.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Oh man.
I remember Cookie Crisp, which the whole sales point was that they were like, there's a cop that will arrest you if you eat this. Because you can't and so they had the cookie cop who would arrest the cookie crook.
They were teaching kids to defund the police in the beginning. That is so funny. Oh my gosh. So every episode of this podcast, I like to review a box of cereal with my guest. And so I usually like to pick a box of cereal that has something to do with my guest in some way, shape, or form. So what I did was I spoke with my sponsors over at Funko. Now, by sponsors, I mean that I like them and I buy all their products. And by spoke to, I mean that I tweeted them repeatedly and they never got back to me. So the cereal that I got for you is Jurassic Park Dr. Ian Malcolm cereal.
Wow. When did this come out? Is this this is a real thing, right? This is a real,
this is a real cereal. This came out, goodness gracious, who knows?
But, there was a Jurassic Park cereal that came out with the last one. It was called Jurassic Park Crunch.
Yeah.
Which I still have a box. I have an empty box, but I still have a box of. That is pretty great. Ian Malcolm, man.
Yeah. And so the reason why I chose this for you, we've actually reviewed this specific cereal before, but I wanted to kind of do a different twist with this review with you. So as you can see, the box here and the back, there's a maze here. Yeah, it has the little emblem. Yeah, and then the actual O's themselves are black as tar. They're so they will make your poop rotten. But one of the things that I noticed that I thought was really interesting about the Jurassic Park franchise is that they actually, in the sequels, they've created an actual theme park called Jurassic World. And I find that super fun that they made this into a theme park. Now, something that I've noticed about theme parks is there is always a mayor of theme parks. Like there's a mayor of Disney World, there's a mayor of Disneyland, but we didn't get a mayor of Jurassic World until now. I would like for you to do a fake ad for this cereal as the mayor of Jurassic Park. So I'm going to find some music here and it's going to be so great. I can't wait for this.
But I'm me and I've somehow been elected to mayor of this
Listen, if this, to me, this election is the only one that matters. And I feel like Guy Hutchinson should be the mayor of Jurassic Park. What could possibly go wrong? Who knows? Let's see. That's good enough.
I like that. Disney music.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Whenever you're ready, I would like for you to give me a fake ad for Jurassic Park cereal as the mayor of Jurassic Park.
Okay. Hello, friends. It's me, Guy Hutchinson, your faithful mayor of Jurassic Park. And as mayor, a lot of things come across my desk, but nothing has hit me as hard as the flavor profile of Dr. Ian Malcolm's tasty treat, Dr. Ian Malcolm cereal. Now, I know you all know Dr. Ian Malcolm and you know all about his chaos theory. Well, this has chaos in the box. It's black as can be. You've never seen a cereal that light can get trapped in because it is that dark. It is delicious and you will want some. Fill your belly with it before the dinosaurs fill their bellies with you.
That is so perfect. Oh my gosh, you're hired.
Now I have a dream. I want to be the mayor of Jurassic Park.
Why not? I feel like you could definitely be the mayor of some theme park.
All I was thinking about though with that cereal is that a reference to the scene with the Triceratops dung that is piled up?
That might be it.
I don't know what else they could be going for that he's like, this is so dark.
It is weird that they're this dark. Like it's just like for what?
Green or something.
Green like a dinosaur or like anything really. You know, like who knows? Gosh, that is so great. Jurassic Park cereal, ladies and gentlemen. They said it couldn't be done. They were probably right, but we did it. That is incredible. Oh my gosh. Moving on, one of the things that I love about Drunk on Disney and all that kind of stuff that you're up to is that you concoct these cocktails that I find so interesting. And sometimes they replicate cocktails from Disney or other theme parks. And let's brainstorm here. Mm-hmm. What would the Childlike at Best cocktail be? What do you think?
Okay. Well, I think you want something. We're not talking a hard drinking gin cocktail for this. You want something that's, similar to like a pina colada.
Okay.
But you want something very colorful, right? So we probably do want to make it green. We're not going to go with the dark blackness of a Jurassic Park cocktail. So we'll start out with some of that what is that stuff called? It's starts with an M. It's Midori, I think. That's really green.
Okay.
We're starting with some of that. We'll go with we'll go with 2 parts of that.
Yeah.
1 part of, we'll give some vodka, maybe give it a little bit of a kick, and then 3 parts of Sprite and squeeze a little lemon juice in there, and that is your cocktail.
Yeah, that's great.
It'll go down smooth. It'll be delicious, but it feels a little bit like childhood in the worst possible way. I remember not long ago they had these root beers that they put alcohol in, and somebody was like, "Oh, he goes, I tried it and it brought me right back to my childhood." And I was like, "Why?" I was
should not bring you back to childhood.
When I was a kid, and there was no vodka in my root beer. You could just. Literally, it's a way to sell you liquor that doesn't taste like liquor, which is what a lot of people want. And that's what I think this drink would be.
That's amazing. I love that. And I know you have a book with a lot of these recipes in it. It's Bippity Boozity Book. Is that what it is?
You are one of the few people that has ever gotten the title right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's actually really close to a book that I've written called the Doinkity Dinkity Doink. Yes. And it's just Disney sex positions.
Oh.
But
to be honest.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And it's out there. People can find it. I think it's the only recipe book anybody has done where it's just Disney cocktails. And then there's stories and little toasts so you can raise a glass to some really unsung, unique heroes throughout Disney theme park history.
Yeah, I love it so much. In fact, you know what? I came up with this and I wanted to run it by you for your next book, or if you want to write it on your website or whatever. I concocted a cocktail that I'm calling 2020. You start with a frozen cocktail glass, and then you put 2 ounces of bourbon whiskey, any bourbon that you'd like. And then you put about 3 to 4 frozen shotgun shells inside of the glass.
Yeah.
And then the final garnish, actually, you're going to need to be in an actual bar to be able to do this. But in order to get the official garnish, because the official garnish is to look at the bartender in the eyes and say, "Leave the bottle." So
I want to have one of these now. I've got another call in 9 minutes. But I can assure you that when my next call is done, that is the first thing I'm going to do.
Yes.
Get my shotgun shells. Put them all together.
That is so funny.
I'm drinking until I can't feel my toes anymore.
These last 2 questions that I have for you are going to be, what advice would you give to the child version of yourself?
Oh, you see, I do have good advice for him, but I don't think he'd listen. All the advice I'd give it to every person I mean. I tell this to people all the time, and this is really, really good advice. I think that as we move from childhood to adulthood, we have this dream job we want. We say, "Oh, I want to do this," and while some people that works out for them, that's what they go after, and they attain it, and they're happy from it. But what I found as I got older, and this is what I would tell that person. Tell that little me. I'd say, you don't need to look for your dream job. Look for what you want your dream life to be. And then find the job that gets you there. Because your dream life may have nothing to do with the job. The job may just be something where you're like, okay, if I punch a clock for this many hours, I can go on this many vacations every year. I can have this really cool thing in my house. I can have a moped I ride around, whatever you like, and if you don't try to make that your job, but instead just find a job that gets you to do it, it's a lot easier, and then you have time to do your passion projects as a passion project. But some people they jump feet first into things and they get there and they succeed. But I think so many of us, our dream isn't that we want to be, the most famous singer in the world. We want the trappings of the most famous singer in the world. But then when we boil it down, we don't need all that. You couldn't, you couldn't, if you're Shaquille O'Neal, you haven't been in every room in your house because your house is too big. So you need to then pare it down and say, well, what do I really need? And find a way to do that with as little effort as possible.
Wow. That is a really beautiful answer. I love that so much. The final question that I have for you, and there's no wrong answer here. You can answer it however you'd like.
Well, wait and see. Don't underestimate me.
That is very accurate. I'll try not to. What do you think the child version of yourself would think of who you are now? Would they be proud of you? Would they think you're a dork? What would they think?
I've thought about this. I've thought about this a lot because I've been very lucky to have done a lot of unique things. And there have been moments of my life where I was at a convention. I think this may have been the one I was at with you, but I was in the green room, and I'm in the green room, and William Shatner walks in. And I said, "Hey," and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he sat down. And then I saw Weird Al Yankovic, and Weird Al Yankovic remembered my name a day later because I saw him a couple times. And I had a conversation with Alice Cooper. I was sitting there chatting with Alice Cooper, and I said, the child version of me, his head would have exploded a long time. I would have never been able to convince him that all these things happen. So I do think he'd be impressed. I just think he'd be wrong to be impressed.
Oh my gosh, Guy Hutchinson, this has been such a blast, man. Thank you so much for being on this podcast.
I've been listening to your show. What I love about your show, and this is a compliment to you, a lot of times when somebody has guests on, the shows are real hit or miss, and yours aren't. You seem to have a really good knack of pulling, and I think your topic is part of it, but I think another part is that you have a good knack of pulling out great stuff from people. So I hope I lived up to that.
Oh my goodness. Of course you did. Of course you did. If nobody likes it, I liked it. That's
the other thing, though, that is great because we've hung out before and now we have something recorded. So when we're really old and we can't remember each other's numbers, we can still relive this moment when we were younger.
Yes.
Fun, because you have a lot of shows now. You can go back and listen to the old ones. You don't remember it. You're like, I barely remember this conversation.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's so accurate. Thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot. It means a lot that you listen, and that compliment is very high praise in my opinion. So thank you very much. So promote away. Tell everybody where they can find you online. Talk about your books, all that kind of stuff.
Here's the thing. People have Google, so I don't like to overkill people with the promotion. You mentioned Bibbidi Boozity Book. We talked before about some of the other theme park books. You guys have Amazon.com. If you think I'm at all interested or interesting and you're interested, go over there, type my name in and see what comes up. You'll see about 6 different, types of books, and you can look and see if you're interested in buying one. If you do, I'd love it. If you're not interested in purchasing, then go to your nearest library, and maybe you'll find one of my books because some of them are there, and then you can read it for free. Or you can read another book there will have less typos in it that's not written by me, and that's also good. There's lots of great books at your library. You can find me on Twitter, and if you're human, I'm Guy Hutchinson on all the social media. I think Facebook, I'm official Guy Hutchinson or something crazy like that. But if you look me up, it's usually the same dumb picture of me. So if you find me on one, you'll find me on all of them. And if you're a human and you interact with me, I'll follow you because I like to follow people. A lot of times here's a weird story. Sure. I get a ton of followers that are from somewhere in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And the reason I get them, and I don't know the whole story behind this, Mike, but I'm fascinated about it. There is some kind of entertainment figure that is in the Middle East somewhere whose name is Guy Hutchinson or something. It's very similar. Right. And there was some kind of gag where he had made fun of me, I guess, or mentioned me on some kind of media. And within a couple of days, I got 1,000 followers who all speak to me in Arabic or Farsi or something. And they like things, and then sometimes will make English comments that are very just broken English, not, and you can see that they're trying really hard, but they don't. And they'll screenshot weird jokes about me that then I'll look look up and they're kind of funny, but I'm like, so I'm a meme somewhere in another part of the world. But so if you come on, I'll welcome you aboard on any of my social media, and we'll chit chat. And if you guys are out there, I love this kind of conversation. So if you ever want to tweet me about your favorite stuff, I'll absolutely tweet you back, because I always enjoy talking to people about this stuff.
So definitely follow Guy Hutchinson on social media. Check out his books and Drunk on Disney, his podcast. I love the podcast very, very much. And you can find me on Instagram at Mike Valdes, on Twitter at I am Mike Valdes, and you can go to whoismikevaldes.com to find out the answer to that question.
It's with an S, not a Z.
Yes, that is very accurate. It is
because I looked for it and didn't find it the first time. So yes.
Yeah, sounds like a Z spelled with an S. Absolutely. But other than that, that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe, tell all your friends so we can grow this family. Bye, besties.
That was a Geek Bro podcast. For more podcasts like this one, visit geekbro.net.